Hello Canada, welcome back to another edition of the Canadian Citizen Journal. I'm your host, alias Tagai. Well, we've got a fair amount we're going to go over here today. Two pressers, one from Daniel Smith and the other from Mark Carney. I want to start off with some absolutely great news. This was just released that Canada's CSIS has finally confirmed that the Khalistini extremists are using its soil in order to target India. About time. Now, this is due to obviously a lot of pressure from the Indian, we'll call diaspora within Canada, trying to get to the facts and how the media has just not been doing their job. So I want to thank everybody because those videos of mine were heavily censored. I actually ended up leaving the algorithm pages up on my computer for those few days while I was running that, and as well as the made one that I did. Like I said, I was getting hit hardcore. They were censoring me on every single platform. So I just want to thank all of my subscribers and the new subscribers for sharing that, liking it, and getting the word out there. Now, you may not think, I don't have a lot of subscribers and a lot of viewers, but there are many other applications and different social media outfits that I do speak out on. TikTok, Rumble, Spotify, etc., etc. And through all of them, I'd like to hope that we did play a small part in getting the awareness out. Now, I've had a lot of people contacting me, especially with just the first segment alone, how few people knew, well, first of all, about Air India, and how few actually of the older generation, between 30 and 60, who actually never even knew there was the inquiry, didn't understand that CSIS had moles involved, weren't aware that they never found the person that actually dropped off the suitcase. There's a lot to it. So this is where I want to thank my audience, thank my subscribers so much for getting the word out, because this is great news. We've forced the hand of CSIS to get their crap together, and maybe if we can finally topple this socialist government we've got and actually get back to, well, not that we ever had a really transparent government, but even if we can get near as transparent to how it was 12 years ago, that would be a huge step. But we need to obviously do some serious change in Canada. So I want to go back to this, and I just want to read a little wee bit of this off. So Canada confirms Khalistini extremists using its soil to target India. In a rare admission, Canada's top intelligence agency has echoed what India has been warning about for years, that Canadian soil has become a breeding ground for Khalistini extremism. In its 2024 annual report, the Canadian Security, CSIS, has confirmed that Khalistini extremists continue to operate from within Canada, raising funds, promoting propaganda, and planning violent acts, with India as their primary target. Khalistini extremists continue to use Canada as a base for their promotion, fundraising, and planning for violence, primarily in India, the report said, marking the first official acknowledgement of this scale. This is a significant moment for Indian diplomacy, which has long called out Ottawa for turning a blind eye to anti-India elements under the guise of free expression. A diplomatic flashpoint. The report's timing couldn't be more crucial. It comes months after a diplomatic firestorm between India and Canada, triggered by former Canadian Governor Justin Trudeau. Controversial claim that in the House of Commons in September 2023, the Turd alleged that Canadian security agencies were probing credible allegations of a potential link between the Indian government and the removal of life of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a designated Khalistini tea lord in British Columbia. Now, I've already proven all of this, there's already enough information from other countries, especially India. And again, I urge you, if you're a new viewer, or first of all, to like, share, and subscribe. But to check out those previous episodes. I do a lot on this. The extremism in Canada is just out of control. So the more people that actually view it and get to see it, the more people will be awakened to the truth of what this organization is and how it's been used by governments, our own governments, as a proxy against India, knowingly and wittingly, especially the Turd family. So anyways, yeah, again, as always, I post all of the links in the description so my audience can have the ability to go through and take advantage of all the research that I end up doing and compiling it into these videos, so you guys can literally just go right through there and click on any of the ones that that you want to read up on more. Maybe all of them. I know I get a lot of people, private conversations from them. They really appreciate the links, especially with some of the ones that are really hard to find, especially finding government documents and the like. So now we're going to jump ahead here. I want to get to this presser that Danielle Smith did. This lady is by far the best premier in Canada, and she's looking to be one of the best premiers in Canadian history if she keeps doing what she's doing. So let's just give her some time and let's just listen to wisdom, common sense, and somebody who really does believe in transparency, democracy, freedom, and equality.
We'll be traveling the province, seeking input in no less significant topic than the future of Alberta itself. The time is right for this critical discussion. Albertans recognize that Canada has not been working for our province for a long time. Albertans subsidize Ottawa to the tune of $20 billion a year. What do we get in return? When we voted in a referendum to trigger an equalization renegotiation, Ottawa ignored us. When we get other provinces on side to demand an overhaul of Bill C-69, the No New Pipelines Act, Ottawa ignored us. When we told them to stay out of provincial jurisdiction, Ottawa ignored us. When we tell them to reverse their catch and release criminal policies to make our streets safer, Ottawa ignored us. When we unite with Saskatchewan to explain the net zero power regulations and how they're completely unworkable for us, again, Ottawa ignores us. When Alberta businesses say that a production cap on oil and gas will cripple the industry, they ignore us once more, and the list goes on. But you know what Ottawa can't help but be fixated on, and that is punishing our energy sector and layering on policies to keep it in the ground. For the last 10 years, Ottawa, led by successive Liberal governments propped up by their NDP allies, have attacked our economy and taken direct aim at Alberta's core industries. They've killed several major pipeline and resource projects, driving away hundreds of billions in investment. Their West Coast tanker ban specifically blocks Alberta oil from accessing world markets. Their excessive industrial carbon taxes and the new oil and gas production cap are designed to keep our world-class oil and gas reserves in the ground. And net zero mandates on everything from power to vehicles are causing the cost of living to increase, business costs to soar, and are even endangering the stability of our power grid in the dead of winter. We've also started a process to work with Ottawa to see if we can work through these issues, and we're hopeful that that will lead to a conclusion, but so far we have not seen any meaningful change. But whenever we have faced these challenges, Alberta has always come together. Albertans have always come together to defend our province, just like we will do now. It's time to lean on each other, ensure that we're having the right conversations, and figure out a path forward that will benefit the people of Alberta. Our government wants people from all industries, communities, and walks of life to shape.
Okay, so I'm just going to scroll ahead now to a few of the questions.
Alex Dollywell, Rebel News. Premier, thanks for taking my question. So regarding last night's by-election, is your government concerned by future vote splits with the Republican Party of Alberta, considering they received a few hundred votes in Edmonton, Ellerslie, and 17% in Old?
Well, this is part of the reason for the Alberta Next process. We know that we have to be able to make a strong case for a united or a strong Alberta within a united Canada, but we also have to address the things that are causing the rise in that sentiment. I share Adam's hope that we'll be able to work constructively with Mark Carney to be able to do that. We've got discussions going on as we speak. Unfortunately, we just haven't seen a lot of action yet. And so I would say that the sentiment that you're seeing was created in Ottawa by 10 years of terrible policy. And I think it can also be dialed down by Ottawa by undoing 10 years of terrible policy and allowing us to get back to investing and allowing us to be able to chart our own course as a province in our areas of jurisdiction. So I think that the jury is very much still out on the future of that movement, but I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to address these concerns so that that sentiment subsides.
Okay, so about that, the mainstream has been kind of using this loss to the Alberta Republican Party. I want to straighten something up. First of all, Western Canadians aren't idiots. We are some of the most educated in Canada. We are also known to be some of the most hardworking individuals around the world. Now, I can tell you this, I've worked in a lot of different fields. A lot of them are very high, heavy impact on the body. I'm talking labor intensive. And the companies, when they see that you are from Alberta or Saskatchewan, and actually especially Saskatchewan, you get hired. Because they know you will do whatever it takes to get the job done. You add that type of tenacity to the intellect, the fact that that as individuals, especially because of the oppression that the West has suffered for generations, it puts everybody in the prairies in a different type of a lifestyle. You are forced to always, well, because you live the reality of that oppression, you see what's going on not just your province, but the provinces around. You feel the inequality, the favoritism to other provinces. It forces people to do the research in order to see the reality and really understand what's going on. Other provinces that don't get abused, they don't have that because they get gifted. Like Quebec, they just get gifted. I mean, they've been getting gifted money for the longest time, for as long as I can remember. They've been just getting free checks. They even fix their books so that they make it look like they need money. This has got to end. And so back to where this sentence started, the paragraph started. The West knows that the separatist movement can't survive if we vote split provincial parties. There are still lots out there. This is why I always urge people to like, share, and subscribe, and check out my previous episodes, because I've discussed this to great length and broke it down with some of the greatest minds. Previous episodes, that if you start to split the vote away from the conservative parties that we have today in Saskatchewan and Alberta, you're going to end up with the lunatic, like the absolute just unicorn fart believers taking power. And we've already seen, especially in these prairie provinces, these parties want to remove this whole idea of a citizen-held referendum. They want to take away the ability of democracy from the people. So the media is jumping on this saying, oh, hey, the Republican Party lost, so see, separatism isn't a big thing. Bullcrap. Separatism, it's on. Everybody I talk to knows about it, is discussing it, and is looking for information on it. This is a huge thing in the prairies, and not just the prairies. Northern Ontario, South Manitoba, Eastern BC, and Northern BC. It is the talk of every town. It's everywhere. And the more that, of course, you like, share, and subscribe and get it out there, people will start to realize, and they go, wait a minute, if I vote for the Alberta Republican Party, there's a chance I could take away the seats from the Alberta Conservative Party. That then gives the crazy leftists the ability to take seats and probably take Parliament. Can't have that. So, again, propaganda media just doing what they do, fear, hate, and division, trying to squash movements. This is what they do. Obviously, my subscribers already know this, but for any of my new viewers, that's just kind of a revamp. And again, I urge you, watch previous episodes. I've done a series of them on Western separatism. And like I said, there has been some great minds, Corey, like there's a whole bunch of them, Wilson, and just there's lots of people who have been studying this for years. And more and more people, like I said, are getting educated on this, and they're aware. So the referendums are coming. Separation, I believe, is inevitable. And the only way it won't happen is if, through these steps, the fear of the Eastern Canada and that little wee coastal part of BC realizes, holy shit, we're going to get cut off from the money train. We don't want this. So there is a very small chance that we could stay together and end up seeing a major shift back towards democracy and away from socialism. But I still think before my dying days, I'm going to see the West separate. It's gonna happen. That's my belief. Let me know how you feel in the comments. Let's get back to the greatest premier in Canada.
Hi, I'm hoping you can actually just explain to me how this effort is going to be different than the Fair Deal panel of 2019. Like, the big difference I see is that this panel is going to recommend referendum questions rather than recommend actual policy to leave in the provincial government's hands. Like, is that the main difference this time around?
Well, I don't want to prejudge what Albertans might put forward, but I can tell you the Fair Deal panel had 25 different recommendations. We were able to act on most of them. There was a referendum question that we put forward on equalization, and while we didn't get the result we wanted, I can tell you that it did spark a national conversation. You now have Newfoundland, British Columbia, and Saskatchewan all saying the same thing that we do, which is it's unfair for small provinces to transfer money to Ottawa so that it can be spent by big provinces who should have powerful economies. And so that's wending its way through the court right now. So I think that sometimes these the conversations that we have here are able to lead to a national dialogue, and that's what we're trying to do. We identified 6 issues that we know have come up in the previous round of the Fair Deal panel that we think Albertans now may want to put to a referendum so that we can take some action on them, but there may be others, and that's what we want to be able to explore.
Perfect, thank you. And for a follow-up, like, I definitely don't need to tell you, Premier, like the West wants in certainly isn't a new idea. You know, we're over 50 years of that as a political talking point, really, and really an action point, I guess you can call that too. Do you think this will be the be-all, end-all of Alberta's fighting with Ottawa if this panel and this round of town halls and this potential round of referendum questions, is a success? Are you hoping this is the last round of this?
I would say it's not so much the West wants in as the West wants Ottawa out of its hair. I mean, Ottawa has been interfering in every aspect of our provincial jurisdiction in deeper and deeper ways for about a decade now. And we've had enough of it. So I would say that this is trying to reset the relationship to get Ottawa focused on its areas of jurisdiction. I think we've made some good first strides. The Western premiers, followed up by the Council of the Federation, in the last 2 years have been telling Ottawa, focus on your own knitting. Get to the 2% NATO commitment so that we can maintain our trade ties with our important trading partners. Build strategic infrastructure like rail and highways and rail lines. And ports. I mean, those are the things that really we do need the federal government to do. They need to make sure that we've got good trade ties so that we can have open markets so that we're all able to achieve what we want to achieve economically. And then we can talk about, once we've generated revenue, what kind of social programs the country wants to have. They've put it backwards. They're spending a lot of money, borrowing money to do it, meanwhile killing the economic drivers that are meant to pay for all of it. So I would say that what we are hoping to do, and I think we've already begun, having a really important national conversation about how to get the engine of the economy going again. But we cannot create the investment climate that we're looking for without addressing the 10 terrible policies that have led us to this situation and caused the cancellation of hundreds of billions of projects. So yes, we'll have a conversation in Alberta. We hope it spills over into other provinces. You may have seen that we had a joint caucus meeting with Saskatchewan. We intend to have more of those. We've got a Council of the Federation meeting again in July, and I'll bring some of these ideas to the table as well, and maybe we'll find some allies in being able to advance a more sensible balance of powers between Ottawa and the provincial governments.
Thanks, Jack. We're going to come now to the mic on the ground here. Go ahead.
Yeah, g'day, Premier. Emma Graney from the Report on Business at the Globe. I've got some comments specific on energy. The comments you had to Bloomberg about a pipeline to the West Coast, a plan for that, or even a deal in a, quote, matter of weeks. I'm curious why you're confident that you'll have something like that in a matter of weeks. Are there any Indigenous outfits involved in these negotiations? What's that actually looking like on the ground right now?
I can tell you that we have been talking with all of the pipeline companies since I first got elected and said that we would like to double our oil and gas production as we seek ways to reduce emissions. And I've also equally said to the Prime Minister as well as publicly that if we have to get taxpayer dollars at the federal level to fund yet another pipeline, then that is a failure of the process. I think we failed at the exercise. What we're trying to do is get an investment climate where private sector partners will want to come forward. And I think if we have a commitment from the federal government on the 2-year time frame, a pathway to yes, and a genuine commitment to get there in conjunction with the Pathways project, I feel confident that either one proponent or a consortium would come forward. And I've also said with the Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation, that's our signal to First Nations that we firmly believe that any major linear projects of this magnitude really do need to have Indigenous equity stake. We've already underwritten $750 million in that kind of equity ownership. We intend to do more. That's why we increased the loan guarantee to $3 billion, but that would be an essential part of it as well, yes.
And then you've tied these pipeline projects to pathways,
Correct,
kind of like this, kind of deal with the PM, I guess you want to put it. One of the stumbling blocks with pathways is that the government of Alberta has not committed to helping with revenue certainty, those contracts for difference and that kind of thing. So will you actually commit to coming to the table on revenue certainty specifically, quite apart from the investment tax credit? And also my other question you didn't quite answer, which was why you're confident about a deal in the next 2 weeks on a pipeline. Thanks.
I'll answer the first one, or the last one first, is because we've been in active conversations with many pipeline companies, and I feel like we're pretty close to having either one or a consortium come forward. And so I would hope that would happen very soon, because we need to send a signal to Albertans very soon and test the new process the Prime Minister is putting forward. This can't be a years-long process. That's why we want to get underway very quickly. So we'll have more to say once that becomes available. And then the first question you had.
Revenue certainty contracts.
Oh, well, we don't love getting involved in the private sector. We do on occasion when we feel like there's a need to de-risk a project. The ways in which we try to de-risk a project are through things like refundable capital expenses. That's what our ACIP grant is built on, is the Alberta Carbon Capture Incentive Program. So once the project is built, we would then rebate 12% of the capital cost associated with that. We're in the process as well of talking about a new way of recycling the tier revenues. As you may know, our tier program, companies that are over a average when it comes to their emissions, they pay into a fund, and then we make decisions about how to spend that money. We've spent $1.8 billion on things like carbon capture utilization and storage, hydrogen projects, bitumen beyond combustion, geothermal, nuclear studies, and so on and so forth. But we're thinking that may be the way that we can support industries that invest in carbon capture, is recycling those revenues back to them if they spend it on carbon abatement. They do that in Saskatchewan, they do that in Ontario. So that would be the way that I think that we would be able to assist. That's what we're prepared to come to the table on. What we have discovered is that because the federal government charges much higher personal and corporate income taxes, any time that there is an incentive, they get it paid back a lot faster than we do. We saw that with that Alberta, with the APIP program, the Petrochemical Incentive Program. Our incentive is getting paid back over 12 years. The federal incentive is getting paid back over 4. And so that's why we feel that because they have so much more means to raise revenue, It is their policy that they want to pursue on an aggressive timeline. We feel that they would have to take on a larger share of the cost. And when we couple that with a pipeline where we can earn revenue, we think that's the value proposition. So if the project costs 10 to 20 billion, and then because of a new million barrel a day pipeline, they're able to get 20 billion a year in new resource revenues year after year after year, that's a pretty good trade-off, I think, and that's what we're looking to do.
Thank you. And I know we have a lot of folks here today. I'd love to give each outlet a question before moving to doubling up on outlet.
So she's absolutely correct as usual. And back to what she was saying about a little bit earlier there, that whole Indigenous funding program, it's kind of like it's like a kind of a banking system. They're set up to give loans. They have more than tripled that fund. Some of the most wealthy nations in Canada are in Alberta because of, well, it being conservative for as long as it has. You can call it the conservative stronghold of Canada. And through that and the ideals of the principle of democracy and that equality, they've always included the Indigenous at the table. We have had they have had a few parties, especially the last disastrous NDP that came in, that kind of destroyed the system and set it up more of a vote buying than a vote investing. So she's kind of got that right squared away, wiped off a lot of what the NDP did, and got back to the investing so that it takes the government out of the First Nations and it gives them the ability to then make long-term money from it. So instead of just, like the federal government has been doing since inception, since Canada was created, instead of putting their both feet on top of the Indigenous and throwing them a dollar, Alberta's looked at it differently. They've tried to lift them up and given them a dollar and then given them another dollar that they've had invested. So in the following year, they're making money off of that dollar. So not only are they trying to keep the funds so that they can kind of clean up a lot of the nations, the Indigenous nations, the reservations. They've been using investment in order to slowly have them more self-sufficient. And you see this in a lot of the bands out there. You see the wealth within the communities. So, and just like any system, there's a lot of corruption, and there is. I've talked about it on previous episodes, especially the ones that were out screaming about this whole separatism. These are corrupt. They don't represent. Don't let the mainstream convince you that they're speaking for all the Indigenous, because they're not. They're the few loudmouths who have been nothing but a hassle and a stain on the Indigenous people. So yeah, for the most part, there are some areas where you can go driving through Alberta and you see it just you see the true capabilities of what Indigenous people have in them to do when they are allowed to unleash their own power. And really, Daniel Smith, of all of the premiers in Alberta, I think has done probably the best job, especially giving that investment opportunity and always speaking about them and bringing them to the table. It's crucial to her and to the people who voted her in power. You got to remember, she is a libertarian. That's why her principles are so closely tied to the true idealism of what democracy is: equality and freedom. This is what makes her such a great leader and has really started to pull and shift her Conservative Party away from the likes of the insanity of Kenny. Like, that man was just, I'm so glad that the people stood up and got ousted. That guy's just a waste of skin. Anyways, we're going to go a little wee bit further, but before I do with what she was talking about here, this whole Carney thing. So, the Senate has passed that bill. It just happened here 45 minutes ago. So the Senate passed Prime Minister Mark Carney's landmark nation building projects bill unamended. This is scary. But when you have over 80% of the Senate that are all put in by the psychotic Governor Turd, this is what you end up with. You got to remember, this is the same party, people. Just now, the guy that was hiding in the backgrounds, the general that was hiding in the backgrounds, he's now the party leader. Carney has been guiding all of the policy since Trudeau got in. Now he's come out of the shadows and they've implemented him, forced him upon Canadians with the help of propaganda, and now we have to deal with these type. Just wait, the repercussions are going to come, and the Indigenous are not happy. And they shouldn't be happy. So anyways, they giving the federal government extraordinary new powers to fast-track initiatives that have the potential to boost the economy as Canada grapples with the U.S. trade war. Now, this article was written by CBC, so you got to bear the propaganda. And hopefully, my longtime subscribers will already catch on because they see I point stuff up. I've been studying propaganda for decades. It's the way they word things in order to always kind of spin it in a positive light. Okay, so Carney's cabinet can now streamline the approvals process by allowing some projects to bypass provisions of federal laws like the Impact Assessment Act, which has long been criticized as a hindrance to getting things approved in a timely manner. Again, it's all on how you word it. Theoretically, if they were being honest, they would say Carney's cabinet can now go around rules and regulations such as the Impact Assessment Act that stop the ability of anything that goes against their green ideology, so they themselves can circumvent those rules, allowing them the power to force upon Canada what their cartel and their investors want. That would be a better way of doing it, of saying it. So while the legislation doesn't dictate what should be built, again, it's the twist of the words. It should say, this legislation gives them the ability to pick and choose what can be built. Carney has signals it would be used to greenlight new energy corridors in the east and the west, including possible pipelines and electricity grids, new and expanded port facilities, mines, and other resource-related initiatives. It goes on and on and on. I'll post the propaganda down below. As always, I always post everything so you can read it. But more than anything, just so everybody knows, the pretty much, well, it is liberal controlled Senate are all on, all in favor to keep allowing this socialist regime to do what they're doing, which is forcing everybody to abide by their rules or get ran over, squashed, and taxed, like churches and any organizations that are pro-life. This includes hospitals, all the rest of that, like I talked about in previous episodes, and show the proof. Anyways, we're going to move on. Back to Premier. Did I miss a... Yes, I did, right here.
Awesome. We have time for a couple more questions. We'll go to our next at the mic.
Hi, Jason Marksar from CBC. How do you envision having this ballot of referendum questions on separation from Canada, and then as well as, pension plan or tax collection? How would those interact with people in one? You understand public
Well,
opinion.
I don't know. I mean, we aren't putting a separation question forward. We're putting forward a question that would strengthen Alberta's sovereignty within a united Canada. There are two potential questions that are being put forward for citizen-initiated referenda, one from Thomas Lukasik, which has one perspective, and one from the Alberta Prosperity Project, which has another. And I've indicated if there are other referendum questions that get sufficient number of signatures from the people, 177,000, we would add those to the referendum. But at this moment, there isn't an active petition campaign. There's just a couple of questions that have been filed. And I don't know if either one of those or both are going to get the number of signatures. But we're going to go ahead and put forward the questions that we hear from Albertans. But our framework as a government is to be pursuing options within a united Canada.
My other question follows on what Kerry was asking. You referred to formal meetings with Mr. Moraes. Mr. Moraes and none of his agents or companies.
Rick Bell, Postmedia. You talked about how you haven't heard a lot from the federal government on your concerns. You want the pipeline project and also the bad laws. Probably, I can understand how the federal government might not have said anything on the projects yet because they're evaluating these and looking over these lists. That may take a little bit of time. The laws don't take any time. Prime Minister Carney could come out today and say, we're not bringing in the emissions cap. He could come out today and say we're willing to compromise on the tanker ban. He could come out today and say I'm going to do a radical rewrite of the No More Pipelines. He could do that today. The projects, that takes time, a little time. But what do you feel about the fact that there isn't action on those things? Because you know as well as I and everybody here that even if he stood up today and said the emissions cap was not happening, that would be national news and monumental. So how do you feel about the fact that you're not even getting anything on that issue, not the project so much, but even on those issues which he could do today?
I'm dismayed, but not discouraged. I know that, and he knows, because I've mentioned it at every meeting. He knows what the 9 terrible laws are, and that we need to either have them repealed or substantially revised as a prerequisite to creating the investment climate that will allow the private sector to take on these major projects. So is it a matter of taking the time? I mean, he's only been elected 2 months, I think, not even. I don't think he's even hit his 2-month birthday. And so I understand how long it can take to put legislation together, which is why I can be patient for a few more months. But session starts on September 15th. So we'll know in 3 months whether or not we've made some progress. And by then we'll also be near the end of this process that we're going through with Alberta Next. And I'll have a pretty good idea of what Albertans would like us to put to a referendum question after that as well.
What do you think the federal government, Prime Minister Carney and his government, what should they take from the fact that you're having this panel? You're having these questions. You may have other questions. There may be citizen-initiated questions, including a question of Alberta leaving Canada. There's a separatist party, at least one. And all of this stuff is happening in Alberta. They're sitting in Ottawa or Brussels and looking at that. What message should they take from all of this stuff that's happening? Not that I'm equating the separatism with your thing, but I'm saying generally all of this stuff that's going on in Alberta that's getting the headlines, including this story. What's the message that you hope gets through to them, to his government and his cabinet?
Well, I hope he takes the separatist sentiment as seriously as I do. It's no joke, and it's the highest I've ever seen it. And the reason for it is because of bad policies in Ottawa. And as I mentioned, they could solve this. They could solve this by having a mea culpa moment, like they did when they repealed the carbon tax. Canadians had enough with how far they were going with the carbon tax. And I would say that they calibrated incorrectly on those 9 other bad laws. So he's demonstrated that he can change course when he sees something that's incorrect. And so I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to persuade him of that over the next 3 months. And so I think that it really is in his court. I've told him he does need to take this sentiment seriously, and that he can very easily see it subside if he just addresses these issues.
Thanks, Rick. And that's all the time we have for questions today. Thank you, everyone. And for our panel members, we'll just take a quick group photo.
Yeah, so she's so far ahead of everybody. And to be honest, of course, with the help of channels like myself and you guys out there, like, sharing, and subscribing and getting the word out, as well as a lot of other independents, we've been slowly crushing the propaganda, and they've noticed it. I've actually had, I on the last video, I finally said enough, and I launched a fight. Global came after me for a small clip I used in there that was 6 years old, claiming copyright and all the rest of this. Underneath the fair share, I'm sorry, but they should lose, period. And I'm hoping they do, because I piled down a whole bunch of facts on how their parent company, Chorus, has been taking money from taxpayers, as well as the fact that if you look into the rules of being able to share stuff within YouTube, they're purposely doing this because their numbers are plummeting. Canadians are tuning them out. Now, if anything, you'd think they would be happy that I'm actually using a clip because I'm Canadian. Hello, Canadian Citizen Journal. But we'll see how this fight goes. But the word is getting out. More and more people are tuning out of propaganda and tuning into independence. Especially people like myself who put all the facts down. I'm fact-based. And if I'm not, I tell you within my show if it's something that is kind of hearsay or my opinion. Other than that, everything's posted below. Now, this is spreading. This whole Western independence is actually starting to shake Canada. It's making a difference. It's half of the reason why the Liberal Party lied and tried to steal a bunch of what Poilievre had been trying to say and the Conservative Party has been trying to say, which swung the election with the help of their propaganda, always their propaganda. The strong arm of a socialist government is their propaganda. Now, this whole pipeline thing, Eby is getting like punched out big time. He's getting hit everywhere he goes. And because of that, more and more people are looking even deeper. They're seeing other things like the voting anomalies through elections. Not only Elections Canada, through the independent Alberta, Saskatchewan, especially BC. BC's got some serious election irregularities. We're going to talk about that on another episode. But she's right. A lot of this stuff, he's running out of time. He's made all of these promises to a lot of the swing voters who were going to vote Conservative. And they were like, well, you know what? Okay. He's not the turd. He's not the governor turd. Let's see if he actually does it. And he's failing. He is failing on everything. And the media keeps saying how much he's done. He's done nothing. He's only removed what you see carbon tax. And then he lied, and more people are catching on to that because he put the tariffs on right when he dropped off the carbon tax so that you wouldn't see the difference in your groceries. And that comes down to your glasses, the things that the bottom half, the majority of Canadians, 90% of the goods that we buy, have this 25% tariff on it from the States. They're not retaliatory. If they were, Trump would have jumped on them. Trump doesn't give a crap because it's not affecting necessarily the States. We're the ones paying for it. We Canadians are paying that 25%. So when you go grocery shopping and you're going, oh my God, that's not Trump's tariffs, people. That's Carney's tariffs. And he did it to try and stop people from realizing how drastically the prices of food would have dropped with the removal of that one carbon tax. Remember that. Now we're going to jump on to Carney and this little presser that he had. This man, he can talk circles. He's a natural born politician, but he just doesn't quite have the patience. We'll call it suave, the smoothness. He's more of he's a jackass, to be totally honest. He's pompous. He thinks he's better than everybody.
The Chase for the Globe and Mail. I want to ask you to what extent you have social license, to what extent you think you have public support for what defense experts are saying would be the largest increase in defense spending since the Second World War. We're talking 7% increases a year to reach that $50 billion number. It's going to crowd out other investments. It's going to crowd out requests for healthcare transfer increases. So to what extent do you think you have public support for this?
Well, thanks for the question, Steve. Let me answer this in two ways. The first is to provide some context to the overall 5% number. 1.5% of that 5% is what's called a defense industrial pledge. And as I described very briefly in my remarks, it's much more detail in the public documents, and we can go into more detail. In fact, the Minister of National Defense
I'm going to
can go
speed
into
him up because this guy,
but the industrial element of that, much of this we are
already
rambles
doing.
This is about building the resilience. What do we do to build the resilience of the country? How much are we spending on our ports, on our transportation infrastructure? How much are we spending in order to develop our critical minerals? What do we do to make sure we have a resilient telecommunications system? These are things that actually we, as government, both federal and provincial governments, these are responsibilities we have today to Canadians and responsibilities that, by and large, we are fulfilling. Now we're going to do a more
Okay, blah, 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 blah. He's just, he rambles, and he does this on purpose because he doesn't like questions. So he over talks in circles and never answers a question. So here's the first thing that he said. It's a big promise. He's going to do it. And guess what? He's not doing it. Canada prepared for a decade of thrift and lower living standards. This year just got dropped. He's done nothing, people. Nothing. And this bombshell just dropped out here. So John Turley-Ewart is a contributing columnist for the Globe and Mail, regulatory compliance consultant, and a Canadian banking historian. We are poorer than we think. Canadians running the retirement numbers are shining a light in the dark corners of the household finances in this country. The sums leave many anxious, fearful, and sad about their finances, according to the Healthcare of Ontario Pension Plan survey recently reported on these pages. 52% of us worry a lot about our personal finances. 50% feel frustrated, 47% feel emotionally drained, and 43% feel depressed. There is not one survey indicator to suggest Canadians have made financial progress in 2025 compared to 2024. Nothing has changed. It's just going to get worse. Like I keep saying, the general that was hiding in the shadows that has guided this entire lost decade is now sitting at the top chair. He's now our prime minister. I'm going to post this down below. Please read this over. He drops bombs. And if you actually take a look, and like with these little few stats here, with the 43% feeling emotionally drained, 43% feeling depressed, no. Those match the amount of people that voted Conservative to those that voted Liberal. There are people who are living with their heads in the clouds. Reality's going to slap them in the face. And I'm sorry to say it, but it's too late. It is now going to take us at least 30 years to fix the mess. And that's just fix it, not get us out of debt. We're going to go on a little wee bit further to this goofball.
Good afternoon, Mr. Prime Minister. Jeremy Sharon, CTV News. Do you have an estimation of what 3.5% of GDP will look like in 2035?
Now, this is a banker. You would think, this question, he should know right off the top of his head, because you need to know this before you start spending piles of money. So you got to look projected ahead. How much money? What's our GDP going to be at? Listen to the brilliance of the man the East elected.
Well, that's a great question. There's two ways to answer it, and in both cases I'm going to say no.
No.
In effect, but it's going to take me a bit of time.
No, he doesn't know. And he goes on, lays a bunch of verbal diarrhea, never answers the question. And then we have this type of stuff. False promise. Carney walks back his 20% military raise promise. The Carney government is walking back its promise to grant military personnel an immediate 20% raise, and instead is now looking into a combination of approaches. Despite Prime Minister Mark Carney announcing that his government will be allocating billions to the Canadian Armed Forces earlier this month, it now appears that the once promised pay boost for the personnel has been shelved. Defense Minister David McGuinty, useless, previously told reporters that improvements to the CAF were en route, including housing and healthcare. That's where a lot of the initial investment will be, of course, including a 20% pay increase, said McGuinty on June 10th. Meanwhile, a spokesperson for McGuinty told the Canadian press on Monday that the development of the national defense is actively working on how best to implement this investment, looking at options that include a combination of approaches such as retention, bonuses, and stress trades, increased starting salaries for junior members, and a broad-based salary increase. It goes on and on and on and on. In other words, we are so in debt, and now with this new expenditure that he's put in, he has blown our bank account doors wide open. We need cuts, people. We need cuts. And I know people hate saying it because there's a lot of freeloaders out there. And then there's, the rest who, they're not freeloaders, but they're like, hey, it'd be nice if I could get this. It's time for everybody to reel in their crap and say, okay, hold on a minute. We're living beyond our means. We can't afford this as a nation. We are one of the highest taxed nations on the planet, and we're near the bottom of the barrel for actual outcomes of our tax dollars. Now, on a few of them, they like to rank us between 21 and 25 from the top down, highest tax down. But I've been going through these. None of them have taken into account all the additional taxes that are placed on us citizens. We're taxed on every single thing we buy. Now, I've been trying to crunch the numbers. Way too much data there for me, especially trying to, of course, do these episodes and the rest. If anybody out there wants to crunch some numbers, I can do a quick fact check on it. I'd love to be able to have that information. This is something nobody's dabbled on. I'm going to keep searching, and hopefully I find some economist somewhere, some financial czar who's actually done all of this homework. But the way that I've so far been figuring it, comparing it to the highest tax nations on the planet, just going through what not only the personal taxes are, but adding into account 3 or 4 of the minuscule other little taxes that are added on, we are like number 4 in the world for highest tax nations. Like I say, by the time you're done at the end of the month, the government takes well over 73% of all of your money. It's all gone on taxes. We're getting screwed. These guys are just blowing more money. Just keep blowing it. This is the national debt clock. Yes. Your share to date. This is every single citizen, man, woman, and child. Your debt burden is now $30,000 a piece. Our interest growth per day is $109 million per hour. $4,577,000, people. We can't go on like this. We have to stop the spending. Why are we making bankers rich? There's no excuse for this. None. The higher this goes up, it just shows how insane the society has become. A house can't run like this. So how can a government or a country? Absolutely craziness.
Question. The Prime Minister.
Now, watch how uncomfortable he is answering these questions.
Thomas Hill from Bloomberg News. You've been in Europe several days speaking with leaders about security, and you campaigned to Canadians about rebalancing defence dollars away from the US. So I wanted to ask if you've had talks with specific European partners about fighter jets, submarines, specific big-ticket items that Canada is looking to procure.
The short answer is yes.
Can you be
on both, on fighter jets and submarines.
When
and
can we expect to see decisions on those?
With the review of the F-35, we expect to complete by the end of the summer. If we need, we'll take all the time necessary, no more, and we'll go from there.
And submarines?
That's a longer process. It runs to 2027, 2020. At least it may be 2028 before the final decision. But it's a big procurement process, and there's multiple steps. But there's lots of interest in helping us in that.
Thank you. My other question, I'll try and be fast.
That's that's question 4.
No, it's not actually. It's question 3. This is the banker. He can't even add. Now I know shit's happening on the fly, but it just goes to show you how uncomfortable he is actually being forced to answer these questions, because this is important. And the follow-up question that comes a little bit later explains why.
About the commitment to hundreds of billions of dollars cumulatively you've made today. The Parliamentary Budget Officer told us that implies higher deficits unless you either raise taxes or cut major projects of social spending. So do you agree with him?
Look at his face.
And if so, how high a net
see the
debt
eye
to
roll?
GDP ratio are you funding? So do you agree with him? And if so, how high a net major projects of social spending? So do you agree with him? And if so, how high?
No, he doesn't. He doesn't agree with somebody who actually crunches the numbers and goes, holy crap, guys, we can't afford this. Where are you getting the fictitious money from? It's got to come from somewhere, which means, are you cutting healthcare again? What are you cutting? Or are you going to do like your predecessor, the guy that you trained and ran for 10 years, and are you going to hike more taxes?
A net debt to GDP ratio are you willing to run?
We will grow this economy. We'll grow this economy. We'll balance our operational budget in 3 years. That's our commitment. But we will also invest in this country, including in our defense industry. Thank you. This country being Canada, not Netherlands. Yeah. Thank you.
What an idiot.
Prime Minister Kate McKenna from the CBC. In your platform, you made some very specific promises related to defense procurement, including artillery and other things. I'm wondering, is that your roadmap to hit this 3.25 or 3.5%, and will it get you there, or will you have to do additional things?
Thanks for the question. No, it's your question's on point. Those commitments, the elements that were identified in the platform, and there's obviously questions of amount, but that they would be consistent with defense spending in the low twos percent of GDP. So there's additional capacities that would need to be developed. Yeah.
And my follow-up: did you pick the 2029 review because Donald Trump will be out of office?
Did you hear that?
Did you pick the 2029 review because Donald Trump will be out of office?
Look at the smile. He's busted. He's busted and he knows it.
Will he be out of office? Oh,
in January,
I didn't
yes.
realize that.
That's a blatant lie. That's exactly what they're doing. These guys have been doing nothing but kissing Trump's butt. This whole NATO, everything, all the talks, everywhere you go, they're calling him daddy, you name it. They are kissing his butt. Everybody's jumped on the 5% now. Oh, yeah. But why is it that all of the dates now come after Trump's next election, which Trump can't run again? Why?
Okay. Look, it's a natural time to review. We'll have enough information at that point. I think we all recognize Canada. Well, I'll speak for Canada. We have more to do given the threats that we face. So we can see an increase in both defense spending and defense industrial spending for the next few years. We'll lay that out in more detail as we work it through. But that's a reasonable amount of time. We'll have enough information. We can do a course correction individually and collectively at that point. Yeah.
We'll have time for one last question.
There we go.
Hi, Prime Minister. Murray Brister, CBC, batting cleanup.
There you go.
I want to pick up on a couple of things that you've been asked already about defense procurement. There are a number of legislative and authorities that the Canadian government has to be able to speed up defense procurement. Do you anticipate on some of the high value projects using those authorities?
It's a great question. The first thing we look to do is change the machinery of defense procurement, if I can put it that way. This new defense procurement agency with Secretary of State Fuhrer is the Secretary of State responsible for that. Obviously, working closely with both the Department of National Defense and what's called the Department of Government Transformation, but basically Procurement Canada. So that's the first. There are elements of that, though, that we've identified where we will look to make adjustments with appropriate authority, but make adjustments to our ability to buy Canadian and our ability to buy more rapidly as appropriate.
My final question relates to the other half of the summit that was talked about, and that's Ukraine. Should Ukraine have been in the room, especially when Allied leaders were talking about it, and at the table for some of the important decisions that were made on its behalf?
Yeah, I think, there were no, the fact of the way the summit was organized was that the focus was on what we've been talking about, the 5%, the nature of it, why have a review, how work together. Our big emphasis, by the way, one thing I will emphasize, I'm just going to take this opportunity, which is because the threat environment is changing globally, and for Canada, keep coming back to the Arctic and the threat to the Arctic. That's something, our view of the threats in the high north.
God, he just, lots of verbal diarrhea. Anyways, he just, in other words, the whole Ukraine, just spend money, buy votes. That's all it's about. He has no idea what's going on under there. And for those of you who are new viewers, new subscribers, I urge you to check out my previous episodes that I did on Ukraine. There is a amazing documentary. If you want to have any opinion on what's going on in Ukraine, I urge you to watch that documentary. I will post it again in the links so you can see it. It's called Ukraine on Fire. It is the closest thing to 100% pure fact on what is going on in Ukraine, the history of Ukraine, and what led up to where we are today. I urge you to watch the documentary. It is not only incredibly good quality, Oliver Stone is amazing, it's fact. Fact. Now, I want to show one last thing. Hopefully it doesn't go too far over time. This is important. Listen carefully.
Imagining waking up one day to find out your mortgage payment just jumped by $1,000, and it's not because you moved, and it's not because you upgraded, but because the deal you signed 5 years ago just expired. And that's what's coming for hundreds of thousands of Canadians in 2026. They don't see it yet, but it's baked in. And when it hits, it won't just hurt homeowners, it'll shake the whole housing market. I'm breaking it down, who's at risk, where it's already started, and what you need to do before it's too late. Hit like, subscribe, and stay with me to the end because no one's talking about this. Oh, but they will when it's too late, unfortunately. Let's start with the math they don't want you to see. From the years of 2020 to 2022, millions of Canadians locked in mortgages at 1.5% to 2%. Now, they're staring down at renewal rates between 4.5% and 6%. Sounds like a normal cycle, right? Wrong, because this time the entire system locked in at once, and the resets are coming in one giant wave. Over 60% of Canadian mortgages are set to renew between now and the end of 2026.
You heard that right.
That's already locked in. A smaller wave is hitting right now in 2025. But the real impact, well, that lands in 2026 when nearly half of all mortgages will roll over. And most of them were locked in during the ultra low rate frenzy of 2020 and 2021. They went in at 1.5% or 2%. Now they're coming out at 5%, maybe even 6%. This isn't a drip, this is a detonation, and the clock is ticking. Now let's talk about what this actually does to a real person. So let's say you have a $500,000 mortgage. At 2%, your payment was around $2,100 a month. Now you're renewing at, let's say, 5.5%. You're looking at $3,100 a month. That's $1,000 more every single month with no renovation, no upgrades, and no new space.
Now, again, I always post everything down below. She does an amazing job breaking this down. I actually discovered her a few weeks ago, and I'm hooked. The name is Ragona Sisters, Real Estate and Market Talk. Fabulous, absolutely fabulous channel. If any of you are involved in real estate or want to understand anything that's going on within the Canadian market, I urge you, check her channel out. She breaks it down in layman's terms, very easy to understand, and facts. She lays down the facts, like amazing. That she's great with her numbers. She obviously she does a lot of her homework. This is her trade. So kudos out to the Ragona sisters. Fabulous, absolutely fabulous. I'm going to promote her because, like I said, I love it when people put truth to power. They're not afraid to say what's coming, what's going, the facts. Sorry, so sorry. Just the facts, people. Anyways, I'm going to call that an episode. I'm a little wee bit over. As always, it just seems to be that way no matter how hard I try. There's so much information. I just think it is crucial for my viewers and subscribers to see. Until the next time, you've been watching the Canadian Citizen Journal. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. If you are, punch that notification bell so you don't miss any future episodes. Once again, thank you, everybody. I've been doing some really heavily censored content, and I'm so proud. I'm just so happy that all of my viewers and subscribers helped me get through that. And that, yes, my numbers plummeted, and I didn't get the views I should be getting, but it's much better than what the algorithms were portraying that I was going to get. And that's all because of you. So thanks once again. I'm Alias Tagay. Stay informed.